Let me share some of the biggest lessons I've learned from a lifetime spent building dreams. First, if you think that you're too young to do something great, let me tell you that you are wrong. You're not too young. In America, with drive and ambition, young people can do anything. Second of all, and very importantly, you have to love what you do. I rarely see somebody that's successful that doesn't love what he or she does. Third thing is to think big. You know, you're going to do something, you might as well think big, because it's just as hard to solve a small problem as a big problem, and it's just as much energy and everything else, except the result is going to be a smaller one. So love what you do, but think big. Fourth is work hard. Work hard. Fifth is don't lose your momentum. You just want to keep it going, and you have to know if you are losing it, you have to know when you're losing it, so maybe you stop and maybe it's time to stop. Number six, if you want to change the world, you have to have the courage to be an outsider. In other words, you have to take certain risks and do things a little bit differently. Otherwise, if that weren't the case, everybody would be successful. Number seven is to trust your instincts, common sense. You can go very far in life with common sense. Eighth, everybody should believe in the American dream. It's real, it's there, and it's right before you. Ninth, think of yourself as a winner. The power of positive thinking. In recent years, too many of our young people have really been taught to think of themselves as victims. But in America, we reject that idea that anyone is born a victim. Our heroes are the ones who take charge of their own destiny despite the odds. And next is to be an original. The old-time greats were people who had the confidence to be a little different. God only created one of you, so don't try to be someone else. Finally, and most importantly, never, ever give up. I've learned that perseverance is everything, so whatever happens, no matter where you are in life, stay optimistic and just keep pushing forward. Never let anyone tell you that something is impossible. Ever, ever, ever. In America, the impossible is what we all do best.
Good morning, everyone. That is an official video released from the White House, of course, talking about our wonderful President Donald Trump and his 11 lessons for children. I hope you guys all had a good holiday weekend, a good Labor Day weekend. I'm having some technical issues. Of course, I'm Tabitha Hassell with Taps on Tap. Hopefully you guys can hear me. Hopefully everything is going to go well. I'm not exactly sure what happened, but when I went to pull up the show this morning, I thought, oh, everything should be fine, blah, blah, blah. And it kept telling me that my laptop needed to restart. Then I got onto Restream, which is the service that I use. And it just would not load today's show. I could see all the other ones, but not today. So thank you for bearing with me and for joining me. You guys are probably used to me having some issues and running a little bit late, which I think is funny because a lot of people come in a lot later because they're used to me coming in late. Sooner or later, I will get my act together. Good morning, Linda. Good morning, Joe. Good morning, Karen. And good morning, Karen. Hopefully you guys, again, had a good Labor Day weekend. I didn't do a lot. You know, my nephew visited with his mother for the weekend. That came in on Friday from the Chicago area. And then we just kind of hung out around the house. I did barbecue a little bit, nothing too crazy. But I'll tell you what, it was a beautiful, beautiful weekend for weather. Absolutely beautiful. I kept thinking, like, why am I home? I should be out camping. And I feel like the weather's been so strange this year. And maybe that's always the case. And from year to year, I just forget. But I feel like we went from monsoon rains, like nonstop rain every single day, to extreme heat every single day. And now all of a sudden we have this beautiful weather, but it's so dry. I don't know about you guys. It is so dry in my yard. The grass is dying. You know, I try to water my pecan tree, but I had a huge limb that fell off. I'm not sure if that's because I watered it too much or because it was dry or because it just weighted down with pecans. My garden is a disaster. Possibly the same for you. Good morning, Phyllis. Good to see you. Good morning, Larry. Good to see you also. And I'll tell you, my garden's a disaster. It's a disaster. I just cannot get anywhere with my tomatoes. I don't know about you guys. I planted hundreds of tomatoes, hundreds. And I'm buying my tomatoes from farmers markets because I've only had a few come out of the garden. Now, I've had some issues. One is is I think the crazy fluctuations in weather and the extreme heat didn't help. I had a ton, I mean, absolutely a ton of green tomatoes, hundreds of green tomatoes. And then a couple of different things happened. One is I had some weird little green caterpillar that was making its way through the garden, probably a few of them eating my tomatoes. I finally, I think, eradicated those little fellers. And then I have the deer who have come through the garden early in the morning, and they come through and they eat everything on the tomatoes from all the way down to the main stem. That has not helped. And I had some really good corn growing, and the deer will come through and they just take a giant bite off the top of the ear of corn, and that kind of destroys that. But I've heard a lot of stories about tomatoes that some people are saying, well, that tomatoes won't ripen when the temperature is above 75 at night. I don't know if that's true. I've still got a couple good tomatoes growing, but we'll see if they make it before something gets to them. And it's a bad situation. Let's see here. Let me scroll up to some comments. Boy, I'll tell you, my garden, it doesn't mean I'm not going to give up. I'm going to keep trying. You know, you never give up, right? All right, where's my little scrolly thing? Let's see here. Karen says the weather is the same here in Pittsburgh, so dry. Exactly. I feel like I need to go out and do a rain dance, but I did hear here in the St. Louis area, we're going to have I think a 50-60% chance of rain tomorrow, Wednesday, and Thursday. So we'll see. God knows we need it. Vernon said, think there is a song for it, Waiting on a Woman. Good morning. That's funny, Vernon. Good morning. Trishan, good morning to you. Jay, I'm tired of picking tomatoes. Jay, I am so jealous of your garden. Every time I see your photos, I'm like, what are you doing? You need to come on the show and give us all some gardening lessons because you are doing fantastic. Good morning, Sherry. And let's see here. Larry says, we had a bumper crop of tomatoes. You too, Larry. We need to talk because I'm telling you, it's not happening for me. Phyllis says, liquid fence, a natural repellent. You know, Phyllis, I'm going to look into that because I was just thinking yesterday, the deer were out in the garden again this weekend and just demolished some of the other tomato plants. And they haven't eaten my green peppers, but they knocked a bunch of green peppers off before they're ready. I haven't touched my squash. I have a ton of pumpkins and squash. I can't, well, I take that back. They did knock one growing pumpkin off. And I'm going to have to look at this liquid fence because, you know, I thought about putting up a real fence, but you know, where my garden is, I think it's kind of an eyesore to put up a fence. I like the open area. Then I thought, well, maybe I need to do raised beds. I'm like, I don't want to do that. I want to do just a real old-fashioned garden. I don't want raised beds, even though I like the idea of raised beds. My garden's huge. It would take a lot of raised beds, making of raised beds to fill it. But you know what? Yes, we do not give up, do we? We don't give up. Fred says we can always try again next year. That's exactly what I plan to do. Good morning, Patrina. Curtis, why doesn't President Trump do anything about the chemtrails and the spraying of the skies? Phyllis says we've used it for years, talking about the liquid fence. I'm going to look that up. Now, Curtis, the good answer there is I don't know. You know, there's a lot of things I would like to see Donald Trump tackle. Now, I've seen RFK Jr. come out and talk about chemtrails. I've seen Tulsi Gabbard talk about chemtrails. And I think Anna Paulina Luna has talked about chemtrails, but nothing so far has happened. You know, now I don't know why. I wish that the people had aligned to the president outside of just our representatives who we elect, who are supposed to represent us, but don't necessarily do so. Because I would like to know too. There's a lot of things actually I would like to know. Besides that, I would like to know why we haven't banned Sharia law yet. We're going to be talking about that this morning. I would really like to know that, why we haven't banned Sharia law. I would like to know why there isn't more answers to a lot of different things going on in this country. You know, I see things, I see Donald Trump and his administration working on things, and I know I'm very impatient, and I expect it to be done on day one, but I know that that's just not possible. I know they're doing some really fantastic things, and one of those is fighting crime, which we're also going to talk about. But there's a lot of things that I would definitely like to see, and chemtrails is at the top of that list because I feel like not only are they poisoning us, poisoning our gardens, but as well, you know, that's just one thing we know of. I'm going to talk, as a matter of fact, we can talk about it right now about Agent Orange and some of the things they've done in this country to us Americans. And chemtrails, to me, fits right along with Agent Orange and some of the other things that we know has happened, yet they don't want to talk about it. And Patrina says, same here. Larry says the zucchini didn't do well. Now, see, Larry, my zucchini has gone crazy. I've got more zucchini than I know what to do with. Mostly yellow zucchini. But I'm going to work on that this week. I'm going to find some solutions and figure out what to do with all my zucchini. I've got tons of, oh gosh, butternut squash. I've got a ton of spaghetti squash. So I'm happy about all those things. Got lots of sugar pumpkins growing and have grown. Let's see here. Jay says, try planting a patch of hosta. Deer prefer them. Oh, I did not know that. I might have to do it. My neighbor feeds the deer corn. She's got a big bucket of corn and other deer feed out there. It's like, why don't they just stay over there? Why come to my house? Why? Let's see here. Kieran says, I have 6 tomato plants and only 1 tomato. I feel your pain, Karen. I have hundreds of tomato plants and I've gotten maybe a dozen tomatoes, but they're all those little Roma tomatoes and not big tomatoes. I think I had 1 big tomato. The rest of them, either the caterpillars or the deer have gotten. Highly unfortunate. I did have a couple of good tomatoes in the front that had the bottom rot. So I put some calcium on them and that did stop the bottom rot. Thank God. I know there's a name for that and I don't know what it is. And Phyllis says zucchini brownies are so good. Well, Phyllis, I'm going to look that up because I would like some zucchini brownies. My neighbor told me that she made a zucchini pineapple cake. So I looked up the recipe for that. It's zucchini, shredded zucchini with a crushed pineapple, and then you make like a pineapple glaze for the top. I'm probably going to do that, but I'm going to do it without sugar. I'm going to have to figure out some kind of way to put some kind of sweetener in there without using sugar because God knows we need to stay away from the sugar. Later on this week, we're going to talk about nicotine, by the way, because I want to research this a little bit more before we talk about it. I've talked about it a little bit in the past, and I'm not talking about the nicotine that you get in your cigarettes. I'm talking about nicotine patches or healthier sources of nicotine, including food. There are some foods that contain nicotine. There's a lot of people, including Dr. Artist, talking about the benefits of nicotine and now how nicotine actually has anti-aging properties. It will help with your teeth if you have any kind of dental issues. It will help with your metabolism. They say there's so many great things about nicotine, and what they're telling us is that no, you don't want to go out and smoke a cigarette because that destroys your lungs, and there's 1,000 other chemicals in cigarettes. But we're going to talk about that another day this week, being of course a pretty short week. And I unfortunately will not be here on Thursday. I hate missing shows more than you guys know. I lose sleep over missing shows. And it's not that I have anything all that important to hear that you guys can't hear somewhere else. It's just I feel like it's like my morning routine and I love talking to all of you guys. And when I don't have a show, I feel, man, I don't get to see everyone and say hi to everyone and talk about these things because I talk about topics I want to talk to you guys about and I'm interested in your opinions. But as you guys know, I've had some health issues and I have another what they call super dimensional CT scan on Thursday morning. And what that is, I think I've explained it before. And I'm very lucky to be able to do this process. But here at St. Louis University, we are very lucky in the city of St. Louis that you have the option of having one of these super dimensional CT scans. It's absolutely amazing technology. And what you do, it's a non-contrast CT scan, in my case, of my chest. And then I think you guys probably recall I was dealing with a couple of enlarged lymph nodes, a couple of these really big or fairly big, lung nodules, which seemed to be stable. But the problem was last time I had a CT scan, those lung nodules were stable. The enlarged necrotic lymph node I had was stable. But I had like many more lung nodules that popped up on that CT scan. It was scattered multiple little 3 millimeter nodules. So they want to go back in and see if those have grown. I also had some additional slightly enlarged lymph nodes, the pericardial, which is the lymph nodes that line your heart, and then the mediastinal lymph nodes, which is where I already have an issue. So I got to go back at my CT scan as much as I hate to do that. I know that's a lot of information there about my health, but I am an open book on the show. That's the point of doing the show. So I will not be here on Thursday. Sooner or later, I really hope to have somebody that can jump in, maybe, Colonel Joe Adams, and kind of host a show for me when I'm not here. I would love that. And I think you guys would like it too. And Larry says, I believe Trump is coming on at 2 p.m. today to talk about Venezuela. We've got troops on the ground there. Yes, Larry, we can jump into that real quick. We've got a lot of things to talk about. Phyllis says, zucchini are so good. I think we read that. Ryan says, my dad is a Vietnam veteran. Again, Agent Orange has given him a multitude of serious health issues. Myself, my sister, my son, and daughter also have serious health issues. Yeah, my grandpa too. My grandpa, when I was growing up, told me, sorry, I'm trying to scroll down. I don't want to scroll the show off, but with my computer, I'm doing all kinds of crazy things here, trying to scroll down. And my grandfather lived in the city of St. Louis, and he also talked to me about Agent Orange many times, actually. And he lived in the city of St. Louis near that area where they sprayed the Agent Orange. So that's a pretty crazy situation. So I've known my entire life that we had Agent Orange, my entire life. So let's do this. Let's jump into Agent Orange really quick. And then we're going to talk about what Larry's comment said about Venezuela. Now, we've already talked about Venezuela on the show. So if you guys listen regularly, you already know what's going on over there. But we're going to get into that. I kind of see it as a non-issue, but it could potentially escalate based on what Nicolas Maduro is saying. But first, I would like to talk about Agent Orange and something else. If you saw it earlier, and I hate to say this, but I'm going to have to go back. I don't know which video is my Agent Orange video, but I will find it. I will find it. And I'm going to tell you a little bit of the backstory here. As most of you know, a lot of us, including myself, as I've said, I have always known that Agent Orange was sprayed on the city of St. Louis. I've always known it. My grandparents moved to St. Louis City, I think around 1950, 51, I can't recall, something along those lines. And my grandpa, told me about it from a very young age about what the government did to St. Louisans and about the Agent Orange. And I'll tell you, just like Ryan, you said, with the multitude of health issues. Now, my grandfather also was in World War II, and he also saw, Hiroshima and some of the other things that went on. He watched it from his ship out in the Pacific, the bombing, of course, of Hiroshima, and he talked about it for many, many years. And so, that could be part of the issue also. I don't know, but he did have cancer. He actually had a lot of different health problems. He had an atrial myxoma, which is extremely rare tumor of the heart. A benign tumor of the heart. He also had cancer. I can't recall right now where the cancer started, but it might have been prostate. I can't remember, but he did have cancer, and which spread to, or maybe it was colon cancer. I can't recall, but it spread to a lot of different areas and really caused him a lot of problems. He had, what do you call it? He couldn't breathe. Can't think of the proper term for it. Emphysema. Emphysema is what I'm looking for. But he also was a smoker. So was it because of Agent Orange or something else? I don't know. But I do know that there are a lot of people in the St. Louis City area from back in those days who suffered a lot of health issues, a lot of different types of cancer, some of them very rare, a lot of very rare illnesses. And Ryan, to your point, a lot of them had children that also suffered a lot of different various illnesses that came along, of course, after the Agent Orange. It's kind of a scary situation, no question about it. And Ryan, I had an uncle who was in Vietnam, and he also had cancer and some other issues. Or did he? I don't know. I can't remember what all his health issues were, but I know that he did have some issues, and he also talked about Agent Orange. So I hope I'm playing the right video here. I've got a couple of them. If it's not, I will back out of this one. Let's see here.
The fog drifted through the streets like a ghost.
That's exactly what it looked like, a thick fog.
It was summertime and it was hot. We would just run through it as fast as we could and try to just cool ourselves off. It stuck to you.
The spray was so foul as far as the odor. It made some of us have headaches, nausea, dizziness.
That's what I remember. It made me sick.
It wasn't the weather. It was an eerie smoke descending from rooftops, rolling from the backs of trucks.
Regular flatbed truck, but it had a big machine on the back. And it had a big nozzle that really sprayed a fog you couldn't even see through. It was that thick. And it really, we felt it as it would adhere to our skin. And as far as the guys on top of the buildings, they tried to portray them to us as maintenance workers. But we was like, what is a maintenance worker doing? And basically a hazmat suit. And they had masks and goggles.
In the 1950s and 60s, in secret, the U.S. Army sprayed zinc cadmium sulfide into the air of a St. Louis housing project, a largely black neighborhood called Pruitt-Igoe.
It was a lose-lose situation for us in Pruitt-Igoe. We were subjects. We were subjects.
They didn't ask for our permission. We didn't ask for them to spray us. My government used me like I was a guinea pig.
We're standing at where Pruitt-Igoe used to be here in St. Louis, and it's hard to believe more than 10,000 people used to live here. As we bring our drone up, you can see it's mostly just an empty lot now, overgrown with trees. This used to be filled with 33 high-rise buildings. It was all demolished in 1976. And according to the National Research Council, St. Louis was chosen for spraying experiments because it had similar characteristics to Soviet targets like Moscow in terms of population density and terrain and proximity to a river.
The government now admits to a secretive series of Cold War tests, including one dubbed large area coverage. More than 30 tests conducted across the U.S. and Canada, spraying zinc cadmium sulfide from planes, rooftops, and vehicles to simulate how a biological attack might spread, all to prepare for potential warfare against the Soviets.
Many of us been in the military and had top secret clearances. We know how it works.
We have died for America. We have fought for America.
You are a veteran.
I am United States Air Force veteran.
Dr. Starks, you're a veteran as well.
Yes, I am. I'm an Air Force veteran also.
Is there a sense of betrayal here?
Definitely.
They want to.
All right,
They
guys.
would clearly tell you that there's a great spirit. There is even a
Sorry. We'll play some of that later. I don't know what's going on with my videos. Patrina says, let's see, wish you well. Thank you for that. You had those too. And it depleted 4 months after you quit. What did you quit, Patrina? I would love to know, because whatever it is, I would like to quit too. So all mine would go away. Lori says, my dad was in Vietnam, died of lung cancer, and was never a smoker. He was a full combat, so we assume it was Agent Orange that was spread around him. It probably was, Lori, Agent Orange, very predominant, of course, in Vietnam. And you know, you can watch the rest of that video. You can go to News Nation and watch the entire program about what they did specifically in the St. Louis area. And it's not just St. Louis. This happened in many other areas, of course, across the country. And the reason why I'm talking about that topic today is exactly what somebody on the comment line had said. It is that, Curtis, why have they not stopped the chemtrails? Why do they continue to allow chemtrails? Why do they continue to allow Billy Gates and his experiments on the American people? You know, most recently, releasing hundreds of thousands of DNA modified mosquitoes. Is that something we want? No, not without proof that it actually works. Because guess what? Those DNA modified mosquitoes are biting you. I don't know about you guys. In my area, we have West Nile virus that has been detected in mosquitoes. It's like, how did all of this happen? And you can't tell me that some of these different viruses and diseases going around weren't created by the government. And I'm going to be very careful here. I'm not going to get into the C word virus, because it will take the show down immediately. But there's a lot of talk there that our government, you know, and of course, Donald Trump was our president then, but there's a lot of talk that this was a plan that got started before Donald Trump was elected, and that in fact, what happened is the virus actually started here in the United States at one of our military bases, and it was a bioweapon that we actually plan to use against another country. Now, I personally still believe that the C word was leaked, I think accidentally, at the Wuhan lab. Now, a lot of people can disagree with that, but I will always believe that was the case, that it was actually, now I'm not going to say they weren't working in conjunction with the National Health Institute, our favorite man, Dr. Fauci. But how many experiments have they conducted on Americans? And you know what's really sad is that a lot of St. Louisans, if you talk to people who were around back then, they knew the government was experimenting on them. Now, sure, a lot of people didn't. These guys were probably kids and they were like they said, running through the fog and trying to get away. Some of them probably playing and thinking it was fun. But my grandpa knew, he knew that they were spraying chemicals to harm people in the city of St. Louis. He lived in the Tower Grove area and he knew. And I think a lot of other people knew too. And, they can go down to one building in the city of St. Louis. And I can't recall now where that building is. The building has long been closed, but there were several people in that building, decades later who were still getting sick and getting all these weird cancers because they found out they were spraying the Agent Orange from the top of that building. And of course, it's going to leak down and contaminate that building structure. And it's crazy. And we just have to look around us right now and think, what are they doing to us? I think about it all the time. My garden's doing bad. We've got this crazy weather, and we know they don't want us to grow, of course, our own vegetables. Look at all the problems with the livestock right now. We have screwworm disease that's now, coming up from the Caribbean, coming up from Mexico and Latin America and Central America. And now all of a sudden it's humans being infected by screwworm disease. It's like, what else are they going to do to us? That's what I always ask myself. As soon as I start hearing about this, I'm like, what else are they going to do with us, to us? Dottie says Lyme disease. Right. Another one, Dottie, Lyme disease. And then most recently, we even talked about this here on the show, is the alpha gal syndrome. And what that is that you are bit by I believe it's a tick. And when you get bit by this tick, you get something, some people develop what they call alpha gal syndrome. And that means that you cannot eat or consume or use even on your body any type of meat protein. And that means that those people cannot eat meat. They have to eat vegetables. They can't even use tallow in lotions without suffering some very serious harmful side effects. And we hear, and we talked about this on the show already, I think last week or the week before, that old Billy Gates, he's working with some other researchers and figuring out, is if everybody had alpha gal syndrome, maybe we wouldn't eat meat anymore. They're trying to figure out, well, how can we put more alpha gal syndrome causing bacteria in these ticks? It's like the world has gone mad. How do we allow these mad scientists to continue? How do we allow chemtrails to continue? What exactly are they doing? We've seen all these weird, if you go online, you can see all of these weird round circular patterns on some of the meteorologist uh, templates. I don't know what the right word for it is. And I'm like, what in the world is happening? Kimberly, the Lone Star tick, thank you for that. Yeah, they're trying to figure out how to spread the Lone Star tick all across the country and how to create more alpha gal syndrome because it's better for us, right? They decide, oh, that's better for us. No, we decide what's better for us. And if we want to eat meat, I want to go out and eat a steak today, that should be my business, not Billy Gates' business. All about saving greenhouse gases, right? But truly, what are they doing to us? I don't trust it. I do not trust it. I don't trust anything they're doing. I don't trust these weird weather patterns I'm seeing. A lot of people are saying that's because they're spraying chemicals, into the atmosphere in those areas. I know for a fact, and I know people, probably people listening to the show, and I'm not saying you're not right, are going to say, well, those are normal weather patterns, on a meteorologist, on the radar, Doppler radar. And I'll tell you, maybe so. But what I do know is that I was in the Blue Ridge Mountains right before Hurricane Helene, and I saw three of those big, round circular images on the Doppler radar just before the storm hit. And we know what catastrophe it caused there. So when I see those, yes, I'm a little, maybe that's just a dumb thing for me to say. Maybe it really means nothing. But that's what happens when you don't trust the government. When you don't trust the government, you see things and you think, okay, what are they doing to us now? I hate to be that way. I hate to feel that way, but I just don't trust anything anymore. And yes, I know that we can't be impatient. We have to wait. The Trump administration will address chemtrails and some of the other things that we see as phenomena in this country. But I'll tell you, it's not going to happen fast enough. Mr. Parnell, Trump just had a closed door meeting with Gates at the White House. I heard that. But I have not heard anything that came out of that. And it would be very interesting. And, I bet that Donald Trump's skin was crawling meeting with him. I bet it was, because I've talked about Bill Gates before, and I don't want anybody to sue me. These are just my opinions. But the way I see Bill Gates is that Bill Gates thinks he's doing the right thing. He thinks he's saving humanity, but that's because he's a mad scientist. He's an evil person. But in his mind, he thinks he's saving people. He's saving the world. And he doesn't realize what he actually, the harm that he's causing, or maybe he does realize it. I don't know. But either way, we've got to stop people like Bill Gates. And I hope that Donald Trump had a good talk with him and got a good understanding of where he's coming from. Because, the next thing on their agenda is they're already testing it in California, is spraying chemicals into the atmosphere to block the sun, not through chemtrails. I will always be convinced that chemtrails are to block the sun. It can be a big, beautiful sunny day, and you see all these chemtrails, and then the next thing you know, it's overcast and there's no sun to be seen. They don't want us to see the sun. As a matter of fact, when you think about it and you go outside, how often do you look up and be able to see the sun for very long without them starting to spray all those chemtrails and blocking the sun? And of course, now they have bigger plans where they want to go in and I can't remember what they call it, some type of solar geoengineering. And they're going to go in and try to spray some type of fog that blocks the sun rays. These people have lost their minds. They have absolutely lost their minds. And speaking of course, let's see, Ryan says, I think the blue bloods are terraforming our planet. Remember when the sun was yellow? What's up with this white LED upgrade? The radiation is super intense. Yeah, there's some weird stuff going on, Ryan. No question about it. There's some really weird stuff going on. As a matter of fact, even last night I was driving and it was just starting to get dark. And I looked up in the sky because I do look at the sky quite a bit. I looked up and I saw this like white thing, and I'm like, what in the world is that? I'm like, that's not the moon. The moon's like way over there. So what's this big white thing in the sky? And I still have no idea, kind of peeking through the clouds. I didn't concern myself with it too much, but it's like, who knows? You see all these weird videos, and I know there's so much AI that I don't know what to believe, what's real and what's not real anymore. But I do know that things have changed. I do. And I know that the sky is not the same as it was when I was a kid. I know that storms do not work the same way as they did when I was a kid. And, it was so common. And I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole on this today because we had a lot of other stuff to talk about. But I've talked about this before. When I was a kid, I played outside all the time. So I very distinctly remember what the days looked like. There were more beautiful sunny days than there were not. And when we did have a storm, it was typically, I can remember being outside. Now this, not necessarily all of the storms by any means, but I can remember playing outside and you would see a storm cloud coming and you could see the rain coming towards you. And, you could see it approaching. And then all of a sudden the rain would follow the cloud down the street. And you kind of think, well, should I go in or I'll just wait it out because it'll be over in a minute. And sure enough, it would pour down rain on you for about 2-3 seconds, a couple of minutes. And then that storm cloud would just keep on moving and you could see the rain going off down the street. I don't see that anymore. I don't see anything like that anymore. Now it seems like they modify the weather and it's either like feast or famine. It's either super dry like it is right now where we haven't had any rain in weeks. It is so dry right now. And then before that though, we were having like nothing but rain. It's like we have this fake rainy season that lasts a couple of weeks where it rains every single day. You think, when is the rain going to stop? And then all of a sudden it's dry where you're not getting any showers, no rain at all. I think it's because they continue to play around with Mother Nature. They try to control the weather. And that's why the weather patterns aren't the same as what they were when we were children. I would love to hear, as a matter of fact, from people even, older than I am who grew up in the 40s and 50s and 60s, early 70s, before I was old enough or before my time to know what the weather was like. Because I'm curious what you think the weather was like then compared to the weather now. In my opinion, is very different. Very, very, very different. And Kimberly says, I watched 2 planes yesterday evening make a small grid, which eventually turned into overcast. Exactly, Kimberly. That's exactly what they do. I now out where I live right now, I'm kind of in a rural area. I have to say, I've not really seen a lot of chemtrails out this way. They must not care about us out here spraying the chemtrails. But, when I was still living closer in St. Louis City or in the St. Louis County area, I saw the same thing as you're talking about, Kimberly. It would be a beautiful day. The sun would be shining bright in the sky. And then the next thing you know, and I'm a lover of the sun. I love being outside in the sun. I love looking up and seeing a beautiful blue sky. And I've seen so few of those, of course, over the years because of what they're doing. But it's exactly what you said, Kimberly. You'll see them, the chemtrails zigzag, and then the next thing you know, no more sun. Everything's overcast. I would love to see this issue addressed by the Trump administration, and I hope that we do. One thing that is going to be addressed by the Trump administration today is Venezuela. Now, I've heard Trump is also going to make a statement on his health because, as you guys probably heard over the weekend, a lot of people freaking out. Democrats, of course, ecstatic that Donald Trump might be sick. That he did not. I think there was 3 days where he didn't have any scheduled events. Now, from what I understand, he didn't cancel any events. He just didn't have any events scheduled. And to me, I don't see that to mean anything at all. We just saw his health report, didn't we? Remember when Biden was president, fake president? We never once saw his health report. They would never tell us anything. They didn't release any health report at all because they knew that they couldn't. The White House doctor is not going to lie. And so they just didn't release a report on Biden. Now, with Donald Trump, we have seen the report. We know he has some venous insufficiency, totally common, for someone at his age, and certainly not incapable of running the White House or making decisions. He doesn't need the auto pen for every signature like Biden did. But I have heard he's going to address the health issue. I know he's already said over the weekend that, hey, he doesn't know what the big deal is. He's as healthiest he's ever been. And I believe that to be true. I know some people saw, and I'm not going to play it, but some people saw a video of him where he was carrying a suit in front of him, seemingly to hide his body. Some people said, oh, he would never carry anything. He always says his people carry his suits. And I get it. I would probably be a little questioning that a little bit myself, but I don't think there's anything to it at all. And I know somebody else said, oh, he's having kidney failure. He's having, a mental breakdown. I've heard so many things this weekend. I don't think there's any truth to any of those things. He was out, he was playing golf, looked pretty darn healthy to me. And why can't Donald Trump have a break like everybody else? Why can't he take Labor Day off and celebrate it like everybody else? Labor Day weekend. I don't see any problem with that at all. So hopefully he will address that today. Now, he has addressed a few other issues today. Now, we're going to talk about Venezuela first, and then we're going to talk about what's going on in Chicago, because it's a really big deal what's happening in Chicago right now. I don't think the situation in Venezuela is as big of a deal. Now, we've talked about this a couple of times on the show already, so you're probably already up to speed on it. But of course, Donald Trump has sent warships to the coast off of Venezuela, to that general area. And I talked also about how Venezuela last week had put 15,000 troops on their border with the country of Colombia, and they're preparing, they claim, for an attack from the United States. And now, the only thing that concerns me is yes, we do have our warships. There are 8 warships. Yes, we do potentially have some missiles that could be aimed at Venezuela. We do have submarines in the general vicinity. But the reason why is Donald Trump is trying to make a statement, like we talked about before, is that he's very concerned about the cartels coming in from Venezuela. We already talked about it, so I'm not going to get into it again in great detail, but we know that allegedly the Biden administration made a deal with Nicolas Maduro, of course, the president of Venezuela, saying, hey, open your prisons, send us all of your gang members and all of your bad people here to the United States. Now, why Biden would do that, I don't know, but I don't understand any of the other evil things he did either, or his administration did. And Donald Trump, of course, has been fighting with Maduro to send the Tren de Aragua gang members back to Venezuela, other citizens here that are here illegally from Venezuela. And Maduro has refused to release them. Now, eventually we worked out a deal where we were going to pay $6 million so that Maduro would take these people back. And then I think he did take a couple back. He refused the rest. And it's been kind of a battle since then. Now, the reason why we have the warships, the reason why we have the submarines, and potentially some missiles aimed at Venezuela is because we're trying to stop the cartels from coming to the United States. It's no different than what's going on in Mexico right now. Right now, Donald Trump is focusing on Venezuela. He's focusing on Mexico, focusing on the Caribbean. You probably saw, we talked about last week, the biggest drug bust in the Coast Guard's history. I think it was 400 million, almost 500 million street value in various drugs, cocaine, of course, being the largest in what they found. And because we're trying to keep our country safe, we're trying to make America better again. And by doing that, we have to stop the inflow of drugs into this country. And so our warships are there because we're trying to stop the trade of drugs. And it's the same as why our Coast Guard is in the Caribbean. We have military ships in the Caribbean. We have done all these reconnaissance missions on Mexico across our southern border to stop the cartels. We've arrested cartel members here in the United States. Mexico extradited, I think it was 26 big name cartel members here to the United States as well. So this is all about the war against drugs. That's all this is. I don't expect it to escalate unless it escalates on Maduro's part. I know Claudia Sheinbaum, the president of Mexico, is not happy about what we're doing, of course. Of course she's not, because guess what? The drug business is a multi-billion-dollar business, not only for Mexico, but also for Venezuela. So that is what this is all about. Now, Donald Trump is going to address that today. We're way ahead of the game. We've been talking about this for a couple weeks now. So there's nothing new that's going on. The only thing new that happened is more people are finding out about it. We already knew. We've talked about it for, 3 weeks now about what's going on in Venezuela. But a lot of people had no idea, because they're not talking about this stuff on mainstream news. So we know about it. They're just figuring it out. Maduro made a comment the other day about having 8 U.S. warships, along his borders, along with, he said, 1,200 missiles aimed at Venezuela. I don't think there's 1,200 missiles aimed at Venezuela. But, Donald Trump might say there is. Who knows? We'll see what comes out of that today. I believe Larry, is that 2 p.m. Eastern time? I'm not sure. But here's the thing. We're way ahead of it. We talked about it already again for a couple of weeks. There's nothing new going on. So don't worry about the situation between Venezuela and the United States military. I don't expect anything at all to happen there outside of us making drug busts of these people who leave Venezuela because they can't, they're running out of options how to get drugs into the United States. Our borders are closed or more secure than they've ever been. So now we have to tackle and believe it or not, I don't think you guys probably already know this. A lot of these different countries, they smuggle drugs in by submarine. Of course, we already know they smuggle them in by boat, vehicle. Right now, it's pretty much impossible for them to smuggle these drugs in by vehicle. It's kind of happening, but they know we're watching. Submarines still possibilities, ships still possibilities. So, but we're cutting it down. I lost my headset. That is the reason why we're there, and it's all good news. Nothing bad going on that front. Can't wait to hear what Donald Trump says about it. Good morning, Nancy. Happy Tuesday. I feel like it's Monday. I'm having a Monday because I was having some technical issues earlier. Good morning, Bill. Hope you're having a good day too. So I wanted to throw that out there about Venezuela because we already knew. It's nothing new to us. It's just new to the other folks. So they've got to figure it out on their own. Now, some of the other things I want to talk about today is we're going to first talk about Chicago, and then we're going to talk about Sharia law. I know I've spent a lot of time talking about Sharia law. Some of you are probably tired of hearing about it, but radicalism continues to grow. So we are going to talk about that, towards the end of the show. But first, I want to talk about what's going on in Chicago. This is kind of crazy, quite honestly. Donald Trump made this statement, I believe, today, early this morning. Yep, 7:45 a.m. today. He said at least 54 people were shot in Chicago over the weekend. 8 people were killed. The last 2 weekends were similar. Chicago is the worst and most dangerous city in the world by far. Pritzker needs help badly. He just doesn't know it yet. I will solve the crime problem fast, just like I did in DC. Chicago will be safe again and soon. Make America great again. Now, this is causing people to literally lose their minds. We know that Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson, we've talked about this several times already, that he is absolutely 100% saying, nope, this is not going to happen. This is not how we solve crime in the city of Chicago. Putting people in jail is not the answer. Of course, his answer is giving people a slap on the wrist and letting them, go without having to pay any kind of bail. Just release them and let them back out on the streets where they commit more crime. We know that happens. And this is kind of near and dear to my heart because I'm from Chicago. I lived on the south side and one of the, if you've ever heard of Country Club Hills on the south side of Chicago, well, that's where I lived. For many years of my life, my family moved us here to St. Louis when I was 16. So I feel my heart, part of me is still in the Chicago area. And I hate to see the crime that's taking place in that area. And quite honestly, where I used to live, some of the hardest hit areas of Chicago were just a little bit to the north of me. And between where I lived and the city of Chicago, there's still a lot of safe places in Chicago to go where you don't feel, the heat of these 54 shootings. But all together, we've got to work out this problem. We've got to make the city of Chicago safe because you know why? There's no reason why the people who live in these neighborhoods that are so heavy hit in the Chicago area should have to hear gunshots every night. There's no reason why these young children can't play, in their front yard because there's bullets whizzing by them. That's 54 people shot, 8 killed in one weekend. But think how many bullets were shot that didn't actually hit their target. And trust me, living in St. Louis City, I can tell you it's probably more than you think because I can't tell you how many times in the city of St. Louis that when I lived in downtown St. Louis or in South City St. Louis where I didn't hear gunshots every single night. And you always wait if did anybody get hit, if you hear the sirens. Most of the time you don't hear sirens because they're not very good at hitting other folks, so they shoot a lot. But either way, it puts a lot of fear into those areas. Yes, Lori, CCH, you got that right. And D, I'm from Blue Island, South Side. That's right, D. And I remember Blue Island well. And I'll tell you, if you're Lori, D, any of you who love Chicago as much as we probably do, you want to see the city safe again. And trust me, it can be safe. But it's going to be like a lot of topics. It's going to be worse before it gets better. Now, Brandon Johnson's going to fight against it every single way he can. Donald Trump is allegedly, now hopefully he'll talk about this today. I am hearing that the National Guard and active duty troops, I've not heard which branch, I'm going to guess Marines, are en route to Chicago now, some having already arrived, and that they are going to be going underway just like what they're doing in Washington, D.C. That the National Guard, they're going to be deputized, they're going to be able to make arrests, they're going to be out on the street, and more of a capacity than just a deterrent. They are going to be armed, just like they are in D.C. right now. Now, we can see how successful this operation was in Washington, D.C. Now, we have to be careful, of course, because as soon as they withdraw from Washington, D.C., yes, it could very easily go back into that same scenario. They're going to make sure that doesn't happen. They're not going to, withdraw everyone until they're sure things are safe. But we're going to see these multi-jurisdictional task forces in Chicago fighting crime, getting these criminals off the street. We're going to see massive arrests. Now, where we're going to house these people, I do not know. But here's what's really crazy is Representative Rashida Tlaib, I believe that's how you say her last name. Is it Tlaib? Tlaib. This is unbelievable. She should be immediately removed from her post. Immediately, she should be in the DC gulag or Gitmo, one or the other. And I'll tell you what she has done. She has asked Hamas to activate in the city of Chicago and to fight back against the National Guard, against police, against the military. Unbelievable. These people, I just don't understand them. Just like what's her name, Ilhan Omar. I was just reading that when she first came into office, she had $45,000. That's what she claimed on her taxes. Well, now she's worth, I think I read $30 million. Now, how did she go from $45,000 to $30 million? How does that happen? And the same with Rashida Tlaib. I don't know how much she's worth, but I've heard it's in the tens of millions of dollars. And yet these people are calling for Hamas, are calling for terrorists to attack American military in a city because we want to fight crime. It's like, how do you even make sense of this? How do you even make sense that we want to fight crime and bring extra enforcement in to fight crime, to take people off the street who are murdering other people, who are robbing people, who are sexually assaulting people? And that gives her reason to think that Hamas needs to activate and fight against the United States military. How do you even make sense of that? D says Rashid represents Dearborn, Michigan. Exactly, the largest population of Muslims in the U.S. Yeah, indeed. We're going to be talking about that here in a couple of minutes. But yeah, so they want to activate Hamas, which is so crazy because they try so hard to act like Hamas is fine and friendly and would never hurt anyone. But yet now she's screaming from the rooftops to activate Hamas to come after our American military, our service members, our children, our family members. It makes absolutely no sense. And I hope that Donald Trump addresses her statement because she needs to be removed from her position and she needs to be arrested. I hope that happens for treason, because isn't that treason when you call on a terrorist organization to attack American military members and you're part of the, American government? I would consider that to be treason. And who knows what she's doing to absolutely facilitate it? Who knows? And good morning, Elizabeth. And Kimberly says, why can't they be removed from their position? I would like to know too, Kimberly. I know, according, I believe, to the Constitution, and I don't know all the ins and outs of the Constitution, but I believe that there are certain laws we have to follow when somebody is elected by the people in getting them removed. And I don't know what that is. I know Donald Trump knows, and I hope he's working on it. But look at all the other people we've had in our government. AOC, who we know, you guys, I don't know if you were listening to our interviews, but we interviewed somebody in Chicago who is an attorney, was running for the assistant DA in Queens. He knows where AOC's office is, and he's like, her office is dark. There's no one there. She lives in upstate New York. I don't remember if it was Rochester, Buffalo, somewhere up that way. She's never in that office. She doesn't represent the people of New York City. It's all just lies. It's all smoke and mirrors. And that falls into, of course, not only the crime that's taking place in Chicago, which, I can't wait, by the way, to see it play out. I really can't. I cannot wait for it to play out. Now, I'm going to be seeing a lot of prayers for our National Guard, our active duty military, for our police officers in the city of Chicago, as well as all of those other multi-jurisdiction task members. Of course, we got to hope and pray for their safety, and of course for the innocent civilians that are going to get caught in the middle of all this. But Pritzker, of all people, man, I'm going to be careful what I say. Pritzker, of all people, he you know what he said? He said, well, if you live in Illinois and you don't like the way we do things, move. Get up and leave. That's the way he handles it. He doesn't want crime to be solved in his cities. Does not care at all. He thinks everything's just hunky-dory. Everything's just great. Nope. 54 shootings, 54 people shot, 8 people killed in one weekend in the city of Chicago. Absolutely unbelievable. And then, Kimberly, back to your statement, you said, why can't they be removed from their position? Well, and D, talking about Rashid, how she represents Dearborn, Michigan, the largest population of Muslims in the U.S. I got to be careful here. You guys may have heard my statement where I was a little bit paranoid about somebody kind of, I don't know if stalking is the right word, but me feeling that I was being threatened. Well, it is somebody from the Muslim population. It is somebody who I consider a radical Islamicist. And this person is, I'm just going to stop there. It's somebody who I feel is very dangerous, and it had me worried. But, it doesn't mean I don't want to be intimidated to where I don't talk about things just because somebody has a threatening presence over me, because it's important topics that we have to talk about. I'll just lock my doors a little bit tighter, make sure I have the alarm system on. But I'll tell you, and that's how they do, by the way. And I'm not talking about Muslims in general. And I know every time we talk about Islam, I always feel like I have to make this statement, but more Muslims are killed by radical Islamicists than anyone else. Because if you belong to a mosque and your mosque becomes radicalized, if you don't agree with the policies, if you don't become ultra conservative like they want you to do, if you don't follow Sharia law, well, they're going to come for you first. Far before they're going to come for any of us. They're going to come for you first. So, the Muslim population is at more danger than anyone else. But we see what's happening in places like Dearborn, Michigan, in Beaumont, Texas, and parts of even Missouri, New York City, you name it. It's happening all across the United States, and more so in other countries, which we're also going to talk about. But I'll tell you what, if you've noticed, it's happening here, the Muslim takeover of the United States. It's happening. It's another issue. We started out the show with Curtis asking, why doesn't Donald Trump do anything about chemtrails? I'd like to know why they're not doing anything about Sharia law. That's what I'd like to know. And people like Rashida Tlaib, and people like Ilhan Omar. Why aren't we doing something about these people? We know what they're doing to our country. They hate our country. They hate every single thing we stand for. And then we've got these radical Islamicists, jihadists, who are taking over in our country. So look at it's happening for sure. New York City. I mean, what is that guy's name? Zohar Mamdani, is that correct? And he's one of many. He's one of many. Go around to these different cities. Look at Minneapolis. These people are being elected for positions in our government. And we see the most obvious ones that are running for office. But what about all of the radical Islamicists that make their way into our government, who work in the White House, who are on your school board, who are on your city council? And you think, because of course they're going to act very moderate, and then the next thing you know, all of a sudden the radicalism is going to take over. And it really does absolutely concern me. And I don't think we have paid enough attention. And I can't wait till actually Colonel Joe Adams joins us, because I know he could really lend, of course, a lot to this topic. But I'll tell you, we're in trouble. We really are in trouble. And when we have somebody like Rashida Tlaib, an elected official, telling Hamas to activate in the city of Chicago to come out against American military, it's a real problem. And I don't know what we can do at this point to stop it. And, something I didn't realize is how much radical Islam is taken over in countries like Japan. And I have a video here because the Japanese are rising up against it. And I don't blame them. They're like, you know what? Whoever would have thought that this would happen in our country? I'm going to show you a scene. It's a very quick clip of Japan. I seriously had no idea that was happening. I don't know if you guys knew, but Japan is also, potentially facing a radical takeover of Sharia law. And the Japanese citizens this weekend have been out in the streets marching and protesting, and they want these people removed from their country. So let me show you this quick clip here. Then we're going to talk a little about that. That's Japan. That's Japan. And now I'm not saying that all these people you see in this video are radical. They might be perfectly moderate, good Japanese now citizens or people living in Japan. I don't know. But the fact is that we know in the end, Sharia law is the goal. Even for the moderate Muslims, Sharia law will be the goal in many areas, because they'll be forced to comply, and they'll be forcing you to comply next. Now, I'm going to play a video here, and this is by, I want to make sure I have the name correct. This is in Boston. This is Imam Abdullah Faraqui, I believe is his name. And he's going to talk about how Sharia law will take over. And you know what? I believe him. I believe him. I think it's too late to fight back. But listen to this video here.
They would clearly tell you that there's a great spirit. There is even a statue in front of the Museum of Fine Arts with a native upon a horse with his arms like this here, like he's making dua. And it's called, I think it's by Dallin, the sculptor, and it's called Appeal to the Great Spirit. Appeal to the Great Spirit. What is that? Dua. Calling upon God Almighty to send the European home, probably. Go back where you came from, because you've done nothing but cause hell in this country and all over the world. And you can hear me, America. You know you've done it. This is not the land of the free and the home of the brave. It's the land of the coward and the home of the slave. Islam is America's future, or without Islam, America will meet its demise. Islam means submission to the will of God. This is one nation under God. I believe that even if you lied, and even if you lied about this, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and you never believed that, and you didn't consider your fellow men as being your equal or fair, you're a bunch of cowards because you don't want to get on the basketball court with us because we'll whip you. You don't want to let us on the baseball field because we'll whip you. You don't want to let us on the boardrooms because we'll whip you, or at least you give you a run for your money. You're outnumbered and you're afraid that even your women might love some of the people who say that they're Muslim or people of color. Don't be afraid. We're all human beings. What's wrong with you? I'm asking you, you sick Americans, what is wrong with you? Not all of America. There are plenty of white people who are just as good as any other person. Wonderful people. There are many Asians, wonderful. There's even some of you black people and brown people. Some of you are wonderful. And wonderful is what we aspire to be. And how do you become wonderful? Submit to the will of God. Or this country will fail. The world will fail if you keep on marginalizing and hurting the little people who are looking just for a chance for life. Stop alienating and be Muslim. I advise you, America, be Muslim. Open the doors of this nation. And even you people who say that you are Muslim, be Muslim. Submit to the will of God. This is the answer.
Okay, so the answer, according to this guy, who, by the way, I want to point out, lives in America. He lives in Boston. He says that being Muslim is the way. And I want to be very careful here. He's also talking to other Muslims. Think about that. Just like I said, he's talking to other Muslims. When he says be Muslim, he's not talking about be Islamic, be of the Muslim faith. He's talking about follow Sharia law. He's talking about be ultra conservative Muslim, which means you're praying 5 times a day. You're following very strict halal, meals. You're abiding to everything that Sharia law requires. That's what he's talking about. That's what he's talking about. And if you're not somebody who's open to follow Sharia law, then guess what? You're the enemy. You're the enemy. So we're all the enemies. You can be a really good person, but if you're not following Sharia law and the rules of Sharia law, if you don't know what the rules of Sharia law are, look them up. Look them up because it's pretty interesting. That's for sure. So these are dangerous people. They're dangerous to society. They're dangerous to other Muslims. And I would really like to know why, again, Donald Trump in his administration is not addressing Sharia law. Why do we continue to have no-go zones in the United States? I would really like to know. And I'm not coming down on Donald Trump. God knows he's got a lot going on, a lot on his plate and things he needs to work on first. I get it. We got to secure our borders. We got to fight crime. We've got to do a lot of different things. And eventually, hopefully, we're going to focus on getting Sharia law out of our country. But you know what? I think it's up to us. We've got to speak up. We've talked about this topic a lot lately. And the reason why we've talked about it a lot is because they are making progress very, very quickly. I just read a statement, and I'm not going to show you the video because it's in German, and I don't want you to have to read the subtitles. A lot of people tell me they listen to the show, they're not watching, so I know you can't see the subtitles, but it was basically a man named Dr. Malouf, and he was posting a video, and it was another imam, and this imam was telling the people in Germany that we are taking over Germany. We're almost there. We will rule over Germany. Sharia law will rule over Germany. And I believe it. I absolutely believe it. It will happen. It's going to happen here in the United States. It may not happen in our lifetimes, but I can promise you at the road we're at this juncture, the United States absolutely will be ruled by Sharia law. Absolutely. It is going to happen. It is going to happen unless somebody stands up and stops it in its tracks. It is absolutely going to happen. Your, great grandchildren will probably live in a country ran by Sharia law. It's crazy to think about, and you probably think I'm crazy for saying it, but it is happening. It is closer than what you think it is. And if we don't start addressing it soon, it's going to be a real problem. And by that, it doesn't mean that we should ban, Muslims, of course, or the Islam faith. Absolutely not. There's nothing wrong. People who truly believe in Islam and are truly of the Muslim faith. Now, some of you I know for sure will disagree with me, but I do think there's a lot of people of the Islamic faith and who are Muslims who want the same things we want. They don't want Sharia law to take over the country. They just want to live and prosper and be healthy just like the rest of us. But it's these radicalized folks that are taking over. The radicalized people are the ones getting into our local school boards, into our local city councils, making their way up to be mayors and police chiefs and so on. And it's a real concern. And if you're not concerned about it right now, you definitely should be. You definitely should be. I'm going to switch topics on us. I know we I started late. I'm going to run a little bit late, but we're going to get back to all these things tomorrow because there's going to be a lot of updates. I just saw an update come through that Donald Trump is going to make, he's going to make a statement today about Venezuela. I've heard he's going to make a statement about his health today. And I just read he's going to make a statement, something that's groundbreaking news. I don't know what it could be, from the Oval Office today about Space Command. So we'll hear what he's got to say about Space Command. That could be kind of interesting. My mind doesn't even know where to go because if I hear Donald Trump's making a groundbreaking announcement about Space Command, I don't even have the faintest clue what that might be about. So it'll be interesting to see. I know that China recently made an announcement how they were able to use a laser beam, if you guys recall, and they were able to use a laser beam to reach a moon orbiting satellite. Because at the time, I'm like, I didn't even know we had satellites orbiting the moon, but apparently we do. And China was able to use a laser to reach one of them, which is very dangerous for us because these days it would be very difficult for us to live a normal life without everything the satellites up in space operate. So we'll see what that statement is going to be about. In the meantime, the last thing I really want to talk about is what's going on in Michigan, because this is just, your typical Democrat style, of course, laundering money, using your tax dollars to launder money. And I'm going to show you a quick video on this, but what it is alleged, and alleged loosely because I feel like it's been proven, is that Michigan lawmakers were creating jobs. In fact, they created 4,277 fake jobs. And what they were doing, they were creating these fake jobs with salaries, and they were laundering money, kickbacks. Oh, let's create 4,000 jobs that are not real, and then we're going to get the kickbacks from these jobs, and we're just going to fund our own pockets. And not only that, but creating these NGOs, non-government organizations in Michigan. I'm going to play the quick video for you. I would like to say that this is unbelievable, but it's not unbelievable. I can guarantee you this is happening in Illinois and every other blue state. I can guarantee you it's happening. So this is a very short video. We'll take a listen to this.
One of the biggest frauds we've uncovered in Michigan.
We've identified $5 billion of waste, fraud, and abuse in the state budget.
A lot of people are very, very concerned. Oh my gosh, to have a budget that's under $80 billion, you must have had to gut a lot. Nope, we didn't have to gut. We just had to cut 4,277 phantom jobs.
You guys realize what a scandal this is? People should be prosecuted for taking money that was appropriated to hire employees and using that money for another purpose entirely.
Gender reassignment surgeries for prisoners. There are programs in there that don't even exist, and they're funding them. Like the Starbase, that was eliminated a few years ago, and they still fund it. We get rid of the arts and culture grants. They're real waste. You look at what they are. Glass blowing, barbershop quartets, all kinds of things, really. It's incredible the things they got away with calling it arts and culture grants. See, that's why Winnie Brinks doesn't want to get in the room with me, because I know the budget in and out. I don't know it as well as Ann. So they know if Ann and I get in the room with Sarah Anthony and Winnie Brinks, we're going to get a great deal because we know the budget better than them.
Okay, so think about that. 4,200 jobs Democrats created. And then they misappropriated those funds. These are government jobs, 4,200 government jobs that were misappropriated. So they said, well, we need to hire these people. They were budgeted for these people. And instead that money went to kickbacks back into the pockets of, guess who? Democrat leaders. And then we find out all of these, a lot of us are always concerned about these programs that the government funds for gender reassignment surgery for prisoners, right? We talk about that. We talk about puberty blockers to teens. Well, here's what's crazy about the situation in Michigan is there were so many people who were upset because in the state of Michigan, they allotted federal money for gender reassignment surgeries for prisoners. But in fact, it turns out that the program wasn't even real. It wasn't even real. They said it was real. It was approved. We funded it with our tax dollars. And then they find out that it wasn't even a real program, that what they were really doing is they were taking the money budgeted for that program and they were using it, money laundering, basically. They were just putting it back in their own pockets. $5 billion. $5 billion. I've not heard anyone talking about this, and I don't understand why people are not talking about this. And then the arts and culture programs, like they said, they're claiming that they're using these funds for different types of arts and culture programs, and they find out these programs aren't even real. They're not even real. They're taking that money and they're putting it back in their own pockets, again, to the tune of $5 billion. I don't understand why every single American isn't talking about what's happening in Michigan, because if it's happening in Michigan, it's happening in a lot of other areas too. And then you got to think back about how many blue states said that they are taking X number of dollars and using it for, again, puberty blockers for kids programs, or gender reassignment surgery for, again, prisoners, or whatever it might be. How many of those programs are really just going back into the pockets of Democrats? I would really like to know. And of course, that's a lot of what the Department of Doge uncovered. You don't hear about the Department of Doge anymore, right? Because there was too much kickback, too much fighting over the Department of Doge. I think Donald Trump knew that if they continued to uncover these types of situations with the Department of Doge, they would have had him, they would have had a successful assassination, not a failed assassination, a successful one. Because if the Department of Doge continued, and they continued going through all these government programs, they continued looking at the tax. Remember how it all ended? Is that they were getting ready to look into the tax records, remember, of Congress. That's when it all stopped. They thought they were coming up with a plan. They subpoenaed some members of Congress to submit their tax returns. They were getting ready to go into those IRS files, remember? And then all of a sudden it just stopped. That was the end of it. No more Department of Doge. We don't hear anything more about it. We never looked into the tax records of Congress. Why? Because if we did, whether it's Republicans or Democrats, our country would have been, we would have broken apart at the seams, because I can guarantee you that just about every single member of Congress, whether they're Republican or Democrat, they were stealing your money. Every single one of them. I will be shocked if there's any that didn't. Quite honestly, they are all stealing your money, because I'll tell you what, we might be talking about Democrats, but as we've said before, the Republicans in Congress, they're pretty darn quiet, aren't they? Remember when all of the Doge investigations were taking place? Not a peep, not one peep out of Congress, not one Republican stood up and said anything, because I really do think they're all guilty. And this situation in Michigan just highlights the ways that they get away with stealing taxpayer money. And I think that's probably just the tip of the iceberg. And we'll probably never know. Even with a Donald Trump president, we'll probably never know the full extent of where all of the tax money went. I would really like to know. I would really like to see the audits of all of those tax returns of the members of Congress. Every single one of them should be made public. We should see exactly how people like Ilhan Omar went from $45,000 up to $30 million. Now, how did something like that happen? And it's happening to all of them. Look at AOC. She was a bartender and a server. Remember that? Now, all of a sudden, she's worth millions. Well, she doesn't get paid millions for her job. She's not getting paid millions for speaking engagements. Where is she getting the money? She's not written any books. Where does the money come from? You know what? It's your tax dollars. That's where it's coming from. You are paying these people to become millionaires and billionaires, millionaires and billionaires. And Thomas, yes, it absolutely is unbelievable. And yes, real estate all over the world. And a lot of times I'm glad you said that, Thomas, because that's exactly what they're doing. Is they are taking this money, you're paying your tax dollars to, let's say, fund, you think, well, let's backtrack here. You think you're paying your tax dollars to fund schools, to fund teacher salaries, to fund your police department, your firefighters, to fix the potholes on your road. And then you sit around, you think, okay, we have teacher shortages, we have police shortages. Our police officers departments can't even afford to buy new uniforms. They can't even afford to buy new weapons or other equipment necessary to fight crime. The potholes in your community are still there and growing bigger by the day, because no, your money is not being used for any of those things. Your money is being used to fund programs like gender reassignment surgery for trans people in prison. And then let's take it a step further. You find out, well, that's a fake program. Yes, we were outraged by it, but it was never even real. Never even real. And it was really just another attempt at the government taking your money. They take your money, they route it to all these places. And I could go on for another hour about all of the places your money has gone. All the money, the billions of dollars. What did Donald Trump say? We sent 350 billion, in aid to Ukraine. Now, of course, not all of it was cash, but a lot of it was cash. And then what do you think happened? That money goes to Ukraine. We know that most of it didn't actually reach its intended sources, and it gets funneled back right here to the pockets of the lawmakers who passed the law to begin with. It is crazy. If you were the president of a company, and let's say you started making all your employees pay all these taxes for sodas in the break room and snacks and blah, blah, blah. And then the employees are like, wait a minute, we're not getting snacks or sodas in the break room. You're just taking that money and you just went and bought a new boat with it. It's the exact same situation. It's the exact same thing. My analogies aren't as good as Eric's, but Tommy Lyons, you are 100% correct. That's exactly what's happening. Is they are taking it, they're investing in real estate, and you know what? And they're putting it in other people's names. We already know this is true. We have these fake NGOs, these fake jobs. The money is getting kicked back. Your tax money is getting kicked back to Democrats in Congress, probably some Republicans too. And then they're buying property and real estate, putting it in their kids' names, their cousins' names, their dead grandma's names, anything they can to hide it from you. Eh, I wish that somebody with a backbone would just stand up and tell us every single thing that Congress has done against us. It's okay. Yes, it will break us apart at the seams, but you know what? Then we can wipe the slate clean and we can start over again and we can make sure the right people are in place. Because I'll tell you, I'm losing my faith every day, every single day in politicians. I'm really starting to wonder, are any of them any good? Because I don't know any of them that are fighting for us. I don't know. I can't even think right now of one single congressperson who has stood up and said we need to ban Sharia law. I can't even think of one. I can't think of anyone who has stood up in Congress and said we've got to stop these kickbacks, that the government has to stop taking your money and funneling it into these fake NGOs, these fake jobs. I mean, Michigan's just the tip of the iceberg. Anyway, I'm so frustrated. Again, I could go on about it forever, but I can't because it's time to go. But we will talk more about this later. In the beginning of the show, I played an official White House video. It's called The 11 Lessons for Children from Donald Trump. I'm going to play that again at the end of the show because I think it's important to see. I know a lot of you aren't here at the beginning of the show. So take a look at that. We're going to be looking forward today to hearing from Donald Trump. I've heard again, he's going to talk about his health. We'll see if that happens. He's going to talk about Venezuela. We'll see how that works out. But I know for sure he is going to be talking about Space Command. And I can't wait to hear it. And whatever it is, I don't have a clue. Whatever that is, we'll talk about it tomorrow. Lots of other things on the slate for tomorrow, Wednesday. I will not have a show on Thursday. I've got to get my CT scan done, that Super D. So that way, if they want to do a biopsy, the Super D goes in, it maps out your lungs, which is really kind of interesting. But we'll talk about that again once I find out what's happening on Friday. But either way, I hope you guys have a really good day. I know it's tough. It's a Tuesday after a big, long holiday weekend. It's going to be a really long day for a lot of us. But I do hope you guys have a good day. I will look forward to talking to you tomorrow. I'm going to play that White House video now, and we'll all be awaiting to hear what Donald Trump has to say today.
Let me share some of the biggest lessons I've learned from a lifetime spent building dreams. First, if you think that you're too young to do something great, let me tell you that you are wrong. You're not too young. In America, with drive and ambition, young people can do anything. Second of all, and very importantly, you have to love what you do. I rarely see somebody that's successful that doesn't love what he or she does. Third thing is to think big. You're going to do something, you might as well think big, because it's just as hard to solve a small problem as a big problem, and it's just as much energy and everything else, except the result is going to be a smaller one. So love what you do, but think big. Fourth is work hard. Work hard. Fifth is don't lose your momentum. You just want to keep it going, and you have to know if you are losing it, you have to know when you're losing it, so maybe you stop and maybe it's time to stop. Number 6, if you want to change the world, you have to have the courage to be an outsider. In other words, you have to take certain risks and do things a little bit differently. Otherwise, if that weren't the case, everybody would be successful. Number 7 is to trust your instincts, common sense. You can go very far in life with common sense. 8, everybody should believe in the American dream. It's real, it's there, and it's right before you. 9th, think of yourself as a winner. The power of positive thinking. In recent years, too many of our young people have really been taught to think of themselves as victims. But in America, we reject that idea that anyone is born a victim. Our heroes are the ones who take charge of their own destiny despite the odds. And next is to be an original. The old-time greats were people who had the confidence to be a little different. God only created one of you, so don't try to be someone else. Finally, and most importantly, never, ever give up. I've learned that perseverance is everything, so whatever happens, no matter where you are in life, stay optimistic and just keep pushing forward. Never let anyone tell you that something is impossible. Ever, ever, ever. In America, the impossible is what we all do best.